What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Monday, March 20th, 2017, and if you're hearing a slight difference in the audio, it's because Republic Broadcasting just put in a brand new mixer board in this control room. I can even hear the difference out here on the end of this Skype connection, a lot wider audio spectrum. More highs, more lows, and it sounds a lot better. So definitely moving forward on all of this stuff. It is Monday, March 20th, 2017, start of a brand new week of insanity. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And obviously the top story today is they started today the House Intelligence Committee hearing on Russia's tampering in the 2016 election. And this thing was a kangaroo court right from the beginning. Schiff's opening statement came across as if there's absolutely no question Russia was aiding Donald Trump against Hillary Clinton, that there's no question whatsoever that that Russia was hacking into the Democrats' database and all the rest of it, and obviously providing enough clips for the corporate media to present to the American people who are not actually listening to the hearings that this is a done deal, and the Senate committee has concluded this is what actually happened. Now, if you actually hung around, though, you would find out that we once again kept hearing, well, we think maybe could be kind of rumor, innuendo, hearsay, no actual evidence. Comey is definitely out there trying to throw Donald Trump under the bus, and I think Donald Trump is now beginning to realize what a hideous mistake he made keeping Comey on as head of the FBI. Because Comey basically said that he has seen no evidence to back up the president's claims that Obama was bugging the Trump campaign, but then he turns around and, yeah, there's no evidence yet about Russia interfering with the election, but we have an ongoing investigation. See, that's the new propaganda thing. If there's an ongoing investigation, there must be guilt. And so Comey has definitely shown his true colors. And again, I think Trump is beginning to realize, finally, that politics in Washington, D.C. is not a business-like environment, and you treat it as such to your own peril. By the way, today is the spring equinox. You wouldn't know it from some parts of Canada. We'll get into that a little bit later here. Now, Roger Stone is scheduled to testify before the Senate committee to basically expose this whole phony Russian narrative of the Clinton crime family. There's all these people all over the web in the independent media, and Congress is out there just saying, you know, we don't see it and we don't hear it and you can't make us. We've got our witnesses here will say that Trump is guilty and Obama is innocent and Vladimir Putin is the devil. And by the way, that was a common theme throughout the hearing this morning. It's just this constant hammering, Russia is our adversary, Russia is our adversary, Russia supports Brexit, Russia wants to see more Brexits in Europe. Well, so do most of the European people. And it's fully on display. What is going on is the globalists, they're seeing this as their last big battle to achieve their agenda of a single planet government holding us all in slavery until the end of time. And it's broken out into the open here. And let's remember, there are reasons to not be trusting Comey. First and foremost, the hearings into the email server, where nobody from the FBI even went over to actually look at the server or talk to anybody in their homes. They just sat there and said, yeah, we don't see anything. And even then, Comey had to admit several Title 18 felony violations by Hillary Clinton, then turns around and says, it's really no big deal. We're not going to prosecute. And I know a lot of people were scratching their heads. I was one of them when Trump said he was keeping Comey on as head of the FBI. And obviously that was one of the biggest, possibly fatal, critical mistakes that Donald Trump has made. Now remember, Comey, before he was appointed to head the FBI, had no law enforcement experience. He's a banker. And when he was over there at HSBC, there was a huge amount of drug money laundering going on. And everybody is saying that there's no way Comey could not have known it was going on. So he's part of that CIA Clinton-Bush drug cartel. And that's why he's doing what he's doing. Remember a while back in September 2016, Representative Jordan was able to get Director Comey to admit there was a cover-up of evidence tampering going on. This whole system is just proving itself to be completely, irrevocably, irredeemably corrupted. And my disgust with the U.S. government as a whole is at an all-time high. Now, a former acting CIA director under the Obama administration who was endorsing Hillary Clinton is out there saying there is no evidence that Donald Trump and Russia were doing anything. And remember, we're already seeing how Barack Obama was trying to get foreign nationals to interfere with the U.S. election when he told illegal immigrants, go ahead and vote, you won't be deported. That's foreigners tinkering with the American election. Nobody's making a stink about that. We have all these investigations going on into George Soros and his NGOs funded by U.S. taxpayer dollars from Obama's Department of Justice slush fund that were over there pushing leftist governments in other countries. That's tinkering with elections. Nobody's talking about that. We're going to do a quick shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. We're talking about the start of these congressional kangaroo courts to claim that Russia stole the election for Donald Trump and that there's no way that Barack Obama would have been spying on Donald Trump. How could you even think that of America's first black president? Now, House Intelligence Committee Chair Devin Nunes is reiterating there is no evidence that anybody has presented proving any kind of collusion between Donald Trump's team and Russia. And even so, the opening statement by the ranking member was just, it was all presented as if it was an established fact. And that's obviously going to be the video the corporate media is going to be feeding to the American people tonight. Meanwhile, Nunes himself is under tremendous pressure. Article coming out of Russia Today. The vultures are circling Nunes for seeing no evidence of Trump-Kremlin collusion. What we're seeing here is a revival of the McCarthy-era tactics. We all know that Russia is doing these evil things, and if you can't see it, then you must be a Russian stooge. That's going to be the next thing. Anybody not going along with the claim that Russia stole the election for Donald Trump is going to be denounced as a Russian stooge. It's the Red Scare all over again. It's amazing here. Now, there's a veteran CIA officer, Gary Bernstein. He has now gone public, saying, yes, Obama used NSA and the FBI to spy on Donald Trump. The whole nation's infrastructure is set up so that those in positions of power can watch anybody, anywhere, anytime. Now, there's a new breaking story. It surfaced over on InfoWars, but apparently it goes back to this Michael Zullo, who's been involved with Joseph Arpaio. And they've had a new whistleblower come forward with a leak that shows all the people the NSA have been spying on over the last 8 years. And yes, Donald Trump is there. All of his homes, all of his companies, his businesses, his entire family, his business associates. They were all under surveillance, according to these documents here. And over in the Congress, we're seeing all those members of Congress with their hands over their eyes saying, I don't see it, I don't see it, I absolutely don't see any evidence. No, I refuse. They're all compromised because whoever's behind all of this got the goods on them. This day and age, it's become very obvious nobody reaches those positions of power without having played dirty. And whoever knows how they played dirty, whoever's got the goods on that, can control them. All right, we're going to take a couple of phone calls here. Kevin in West Virginia, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, you hit the nail right on the head with the with InfoWars and Drudge releasing the information that they have the NSA database all the way back to 2004 that Bush and Obama were spying on Trump.
Yeah, well, again, there's that Bush-Clinton CIA drug cartel, and they're absolutely terrified of Donald Trump, and more to the point, they're terrified of a populist movement. We're getting some noise on the line here. There's terrified of a populist movement that could actually call for a full, real investigation.
How can we push that?
Well,
how can we push that?
We're going to have to get into the
there?
streets of Washington, D.C. and scream and say, we want that narcocracy brought down. Or let's be honest, we're at the point right now where there are only two possible future courses of the United States. One is the collapse of the federal government, possibly triggered by this civil war the liberal snowflakes seem intent on starting, and the other is the war hawks succeed in getting us into World War III, and we lose it. Those are the only two possible outcomes I see from this point forward.
Yeah, and with the whole North Korea thing kind of scares me a little bit to divert attention away from this whole NSA breach of the database. Whoever this guy is, Dennis, and I forget the last name, he's a hero, like Snowden and like Julian Assange. I believe in all my heart that this guy needs to be put up, I don't want to say on a pedestal, but we definitely need to commend his actions and thank him for what he's done.
And we need to support his actions by taking everything that's being released and just flood it onto social media, flood it to our email lists. At this point, it is very obvious the corporate media is going to do everything they can to sell the idea that Putin and Trump are evil and that Obama, Clinton, Bushes are just sweetness and light, and we should have never, ever been so impertinent as to put a populist president into the White House. It's outright war between the corporate media and the free American people, and the free American people better dig in and start really working on this.
Let's get this done. You have a good day, Mr. Rivero.
All right.
God bless and Godspeed.
All right, thank you very much. Here we're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Yeah, I was watching this. What a disgrace. This is what this country's come to, Mike.
Yep.
All lies. You know, all lies, lies, lies. They know. They're not telling, you know, they know they're lying.
Yes.
They themselves know. You know, I mean, I don't know what to make of it, Mike. I think this country's finished.
It
really is.
Unfortunately, I agree. We've come to that point here, and they're out there lying. The core media is lying. The politicians are lying, and they're trying to sell this idea that if you don't believe the lies, that you are the person who's in the wrong, you know, that you're not patriotic, that you're not a loyal American. If you dare to think for yourself, you must be a Russian stooge.
Yeah, just ask Rand Paul. John McCain's on board with this whole globalist agenda. Look what he said to Rand Paul.
Yeah,
you know, I mean,
working for Putin here. Washington Post was saying all of the independent media are arms of Russian propaganda, including my website. There was that list that Harvard University just put on out, you know, trying to denounce us all. They've openly declared war, and now we're hearing all these politicians out there saying that there should be a law that allows social media to be filtered of fake news, with the government, of course, in charge of deciding what is fake and what is real.
Yeah, if you don't agree with their agenda, you're a Russian agent, homophobe, Islamophobe, racist, fascist, whatever, the same playbook. It's so sickening, and a lot more American people need to say stuff to other people what's going on, because this is going to lead to even more division in this country. So your Congress and Senate is actually going to create more division in this country with this Russian thing, because I just don't
and that's on top of the liberal snowflakes splitting the country between blacks and whites, men and women, gays and straights. I mean, the whole nation is beginning to fragment. And again, this is a repeat of the pattern that we saw in the Soviet Union just a couple of months before it all began to fall apart. And given a choice between a world war that we're going to lose and seeing the collapse of the federal government, obviously I favor the collapse of the federal government, because a lot fewer people are going to be hurt. The money junkies will be hurt. Who cares about them? The politicians will be hurt. Who cares about them? So, you know, better a collapse of the federal government than a world war that we're going to lose.
Hey, Mike, on just the previous caller was talking about North Korean thing is aimed at China, because China is a threat to that globalist oligarchy financial system, which, by the way, doesn't the debt ceiling come up this year?
Well, it sort of came and went, and they're sort of pretending it doesn't really exist anymore. Congress says they may have a debate about it sometime in the autumn, but at this point they're just pretending the debt ceiling doesn't exist anymore, and they're borrowing and spending for more war like it's going out of style. And, you know, it's sort of ironic, because the more they inflate the U.S. money supply and make the dollar worthless, the more other countries want to stop using that U.S. dollar, but that wanting to stop using the U.S. dollar is what triggers the wars.
Yeah, because if you look, the only people buying the U.S. debt is the Federal Reserve now, right?
Instantly created fantasy money to buy up instantly created fantasy treasury bonds. It's just a paper shuffle back and forth to try and make it look like there's still a working economy in this country, and there isn't. And you don't need me to tell you that. Go down to your local shopping malls or the main street of your local town. Look at all the retail vacancies. Look at the decayed roads, the corroded fixtures. Look at the infrastructure. Look at all the homeless and hungry people out there. There's no way that you can think this is a working nation, a working economy anymore in this nation.
It's not. Look in California, on the sides of the highway, there's tent cities now, and in L.A., and not reporting on the news because that'll be bad news. So, they're probably going to give a plane ride to the next town, right?
Well, they are, and everybody's trying to shovel the homeless someplace else, but there are simply too many of them. Here in Hawaii, they're just trying to get them out of Waikiki because it looks bad for the tourists. But, I mean, they're all around that Pearl Harbor area. If you remember that Dog the Bounty Hunter show, apparently there's a huge encampment up in the Helemanu Hills, and it's so dangerous up there. Social workers don't even go up there to do a head count because they're afraid of not coming back. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they're eating the government workers up there, in which case let's get a bus and throw some more government workers on there with some ketchup and mustard and relish and soy sauce, lots of soy sauce, and send it back up into that Helemanu Hill region.
It's amazing. They find money for weapons. They can give two craps about, like, people either freezing to death or
that's exactly
not
right.
having no food.
That's exactly right. And there's more confirmation later on in the show where the mindset in Wall Street and Washington, D.C. is same thing I've been saying for months. If they can't get a major war going, this nation is absolutely finished. And that's why they're pushing. Now, as far as North Korea is concerned, the interim president of South Korea does not want to go to war. In fact, he's very much pro-reunification that they were talking about 5-6 years ago. China's pushing back saying absolutely not. And so Tillerson is out there trying to make it sound like the U.S. is accomplishing something over there, but they didn't. So the next step is probably going to be the U.S. going into South Korea and trying to rig their elections to get a war hawk as the new president of South Korea. Then they'll move forward. If that doesn't work, they'll try a false flag, missiles into South Korea, missiles into China, missiles into Japan, maybe even a missile over here to Hawaii. But they are desperate. They are absolutely desperate because they truly believe that without a major war to distract us all from what's gone wrong with this country, that it's all going to fall apart. And we're going to lose that one for reasons I have stated before. Anyway, Dustin, going to let you go. Got a lot of callers today. Steve in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, it appears that the Clinton power, whether it be the money or the blackmailing of James Comey, is making him change his mind on this whole Russian hoax deal. Why can't Trump just correct the situation? He's hired a bad employee and fire the guy.
Well, the question is timing. Trump would have been well advised to replace Comey during the transition. If he fires Comey now, it's going to be equated with Richard Nixon's firing of the special prosecutor during Watergate. It'll be spun as evidence of his obvious guilt. And so Trump played that one very, very badly, and he's in serious political trouble. Because all they need to do is convince the American people there's just a possibility of collusion between Trump and Putin, and then they can go on in with the 25th Amendment and say, you're just going to have to step down for a little while until we know for sure one way or the other. And that is where I think they're heading with this. They're not going to prove there was collusion because there wasn't. What they're going to do is use the possibility there was collusion in order to force Trump out of the White House.
Yeah, I agree that from the very beginning that was a poor choice keeping this man in office, that he should have got rid of him. Hey, one last thing. I know that Obama went to the NSA, tried to get approval for wiretapping, surveillance. The FBI turned him down. NSA turned him down. The FISA courts turned him down. But what I understand is the British intelligence had their hands on this now. So it would not be U.S. hands spying, but it would be British intelligence. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, that goes back to the Five Eyes Echelon program of the 1980s. Each participant spies on the citizens of the other country, trades the data to get around the laws saying you're not allowed to spy on your own people. Anyway, Steve, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take a few more phone calls, then we're going to close the lines and get on back to the news here. And And so let's talk with Tom in Minnesota. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. It appears to me that the biggest religion in America, maybe the world, is belief in government. You know, believe what we say and don't you dare use reason.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question. Government operates as a religion. It depends on the blind faith and belief and obedience of the masses just to be able to function. So does banking, for that matter. And that's why I keep saying you should never allow belief to be any kind of a framework for your thought processes. But they need belief to control us, and that's why from the very youngest age we are bribed to allow belief to overrule reason and objectivity. Believe in the bunny rabbit, you get chocolate eggs. Believe in the red man at the North Pole, you get a bicycle. Believe in the tooth fairy, and on and on and on. As little children, we are brainwashed to allow beliefs to overrule all other mental processes.
Yes, I'd like to personally ask the Christians out there. I am not one, but I've read their New Testament, and I see a Prince of Peace, and I'm wondering why they constantly follow the God of War government every time it grabs them by the nose and leads them away.
Well, there's a legal reason for that. Churches operate as a 501c3 for their tax-exempt status, and as such, they are not allowed to be advocates for political issues. Now, obviously, in a very general term, you can talk about war, you can talk about peace, but any congregation is basically going to be looking at, any church is going to be looking at the congregation, what their makeup is. If you have a pastor who's got a church primarily full of military people, they're going to talk about the glory of war, because otherwise the people are going to go someplace else and throw their coins into a different collection plate. So,
so in the big,
say again?
in the big picture, who are they submitting to?
Well, it goes back to Romans 13. You know, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. If Caesar says go to war, well, then if you want to go to heaven, you'll have to go off to war.
Yeah, and I think McCain's the new high priest there, the way he treated Rand Paul and basically everyone. If you don't agree with what I say on this treaty, then you're Putin's stooge, you know.
Yeah, they're bringing back McCarthyism.
You know,
they're bringing back McCarthyism,
yeah.
The Red Scare. And you need to go back and look at McCarthyism, the abuses of it, the huge fight between the government and Edward R. Murrow, which cost Murrow his ride at CBS. And all Joseph McCarthy suffered is he had to sit in the back row of Congress for a little while. And that was basically it. But lives were destroyed and ruined, and they're getting ready to do it all over again, unfortunately.
Yep. So I think people need to realize, though, that government is being treated as a religion, and people better start using reason, or we're going to go down a very bad path.
You know, there's a very good movie came out a few years ago called Good Night and Good Luck, which was Edward R. Murrow's signature sign-off. It was actually done in black and white. It's a very wonderfully done movie. George Clooney's in there. In fact, I think Clooney directed it or produced it. And you need to hunt that down on Netflix and watch it. It's a very accurate telling of what happened. It even uses a lot of original source footage about just how the McCarthy... Sorry?
I think he was related to Murrow, wasn't he? Clooney, I think.
No, he was the nephew of Rosie...
the singer.
The singer, yeah.
Clooney.
Yeah, Rosemary Clooney, that was it, which led to a certain embarrassment on Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, because everybody assumed that George Clooney could sing until he actually got up and did it, and that's why all of his stuff had to be looped. Anyway, we're going to let you go here, and we're going to start with James in Charlotte. And James, I'm probably going to have to take you over the commercial break. James, are you there?
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Oh, yeah. Okay, thanks. You just mentioned one of my favorite movies, Good Night and Good Luck.
Yes.
I think everybody should watch that if they get a chance to do so. I'm beginning to wonder, Mike, if Trump has got any allies left at all in Congress. There's abundant evidence available to the Intelligence Committee to ask some pertinent questions, but they just refuse to do so. They keep concentrating on this point of whether or not Obama ordered surveillance, when they know full well that the president does not have the authority to order surveillance on American citizens.
Well, they're trying to nitpick and play word games to get around the issue. I mean, they never actually proved that Richard Nixon ordered the bugging of the Democratic, or the burglary of the Democratic National Headquarters, but he still had to resign. Going to let you go here. Going to take a break for commercials. We're going to be closing the phone lines. Back with more news after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I just found a clip from that movie we were talking about, Good Night and Good Luck. And it's a clip basically of the speech that Edward R. Murrow gave toward the end of his career. He's being honored for the amazing person that he had been, true to the basic principles of journalism, and certainly his fight against McCarthy and the House Committee on Un-American Activities, which just destroyed so many innocent lives, targeting people who just didn't want to go along with this idea that, well, we beat the Nazis in World War II, we need a new enemy, it's going to be Russia, 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 Russia. And very obviously, the government wants to go back there. They want to go back to the Cold War because they remember the good old days of the Cold War in the 1950s and the 1960s, where all they had to do was shout Russian at us and we would obediently wet ourselves, salute the flag, and fling our money and the lives of our children into whatever war they wanted at the moment. And they miss those good old days of an unquestioning, obedient American people. And they think a new Cold War is going to bring that back. I'm afraid they have seriously miscalculated. Because especially for people of my age, we remember that Cold War. We remember the over-the-top propaganda. And we remember how it was all a lie to trick us into obedience, trick us out of our money, trick us out of the life and limb of ourselves, and then later on our children. And they're trying to do it again. Now then, former CIA officer Larry Johnson was recently on the Alex Jones show, and basically confirming again from multiple intelligence sources that, yes, Donald Trump was being spied on during the presidential election. Now, Obama's defenders are trying to say, well, you can't prove he ordered it. Well, once you prove that the surveillance took place, somebody ordered it, who's going to take the fall for that? If both the CIA and NSA and GCHQ and the FRA in Sweden were spying on Donald Trump, where's the one point those all come together where somebody could say, we need to do this? And as I mentioned before, nobody ever actually proved that Richard Nixon explicitly himself gave the order for the burglary of the Watergate Hotel. But he still had to resign. Now, article over in katon.com, The Unholy Alliance Against American Freedom. It's a very good article. And starts out, the Democrats, the liberal media, the snowflakes, they're bad losers, and they're making themselves look ridiculous with their continuing campaign against Donald Trump as the president. But do not underestimate them. The reality is that Donald Trump, American democracy, and the free world as a whole are in grave danger because the war on Trump is just the local face of the war on independence and sovereignty by the globalists. Now, the good news is we've forced them into view, into public view. For the longest time, the globalists, the New World Order people were operating in the dark. You didn't know it was out there. Every once in a while, you'd have somebody like George Herbert Walker Bush would slip up and talk about a New World Order in his speeches, but that was it. Now we're seeing it everywhere. Interference in the Scottish independence referendum, interference in the Brexit, interference in our election. And by the way, keep in mind, as they talk about Russia, 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 all of the election fraud that has been uncovered so far favored Hillary Clinton. And that's why you know this blame Russia, Russia's the bad guy, it's just so much USDA choice bovine excrement. They want to convince you that you must hate Russia so much that you will forgive and forget all of the abuse you have suffered at the hands of the United States government and Wall Street, throw a snappy salute at that flag, and fling your babies onto the enemy's bayonets. Now, Bernie Sanders is out there saying that the Democratic Party, as it is constituted today, is sinking like the Titanic. The shenanigans that the Democratic National Committee played during last year's primaries and then the election have left a sour taste in people who are Democrat in their thinking. And Bernie Sanders is talking about forming a new third party from which he will probably draw much of the current Democratic Party's rank and file, who are feeling like they were ignored, abused, they were treated like, give us your money and your vote, and otherwise shut up, we know what's best, and you don't. Meanwhile, getting back to this idea of the desperate desire for a war in the hope that we will all forget what's been going on. Does it work the last two times? You know, crash of 1917, World War I, crash of 1929, World War II, crash of 2008, World War III. See, it all works. It's going to work. So now we have Representative Seth Moulton. He's a member of the House Armed Service Committee. He is a liberal Democrat, and now he's out there all over the media saying that nuclear war with Russia is a possibility, and we have to prepare for it right now. So I imagine they're going to take that little 1960s cartoon with Bert the Turtle, duck and cover, and start showing it to the kids. And that whole duck and cover cartoon was a piece of propaganda. None of the recommendations in that film would actually work to protect you from a nuclear attack. The purpose of the film was to convince little kids that nuclear war was survivable so that they would go home and tell their parents, well, we learned in school that nuclear war is survivable with just a little bit of preparation, in order to push back against the growing opposition to the existence of these weapons by the generation that had actually seen firsthand what they can do. Now, getting on back to the vote fraud, yet more voting by non-citizens has been found in Maryland. More and more they're digging on in, they're filing lawsuits. The various election commissions are trying to push back and saying, no, 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 you're not allowed to look, not allowed to look. The NAACP is now out there saying that anybody who's questioning the accuracy of last year's election is just doing so from racist motives, that they resent illegal immigrants voting in the election. It's got nothing to do with resentment. It is illegal for an illegal alien to vote in our elections. And we've got that video of Barack Obama out there saying, sure, vote in our elections. You won't be deported. Immigration's not going to be around those polling places. Yes, feel free to vote in our elections. That right there is evidence of incitement to commit election fraud. Now, over in Great Britain, they have been looking very closely at the 2015 Great Britain general election, and according to the British police, they're finding indications Nigel Farage was the victim of massive election fraud. And so now we have this article, this came out of the Express in Great Britain, where Jean-Claude Juncker, the Führer of the European Union, is out there saying Marine Le Pen will not win the French presidential election. It's absolutely certain she will not win. I guess the subtext of that message is we screwed Scottish independence. We really came close to screwing Brexit. We almost screwed Trump. We definitely screwed Geert Wilders. We screwed Farage, and we're going to screw Marine Le Pen so bad she won't be able to sit down for a week. They're not even trying to hide the fact that elections have become, for the most part, an illusion. And in this country, if Donald Trump does not come down hard and overhaul our election system, he's going to be a one-term president. Because following the disaster last year, where the election riggers were not able to overcome the will of the American people, do you think they have quit? Do you think they've taken down their shingle, elections stolen, and retired? Of course not. They're going back to their backers and saying, we need twice as much money. If we'd had twice as much money, Hillary will be president, and we need twice as much money to get Trump out of the White House. And the big money people will pay it. Right now, the American election system is a disgrace. It is designed to facilitate and conceal election fraud. We need an election system that is very difficult to rig and very easy to find the vote riggers when it happens. That's what we need. And we ought to have a very simple rule, and it's in the blueprint for the new America. If a campaign is caught engaging in election fraud, that candidate is immediately banned from public life. These days, people are trying to steal election. They're trying to steal the entire country. Does the punishment fit the crime? No. Because if they steal the election, they've got the country what they wanted. If they fail to steal the election like Hillary, she's still out there saying, oh, I'll go be mayor of New York City now. There's no incentive under current U.S. law not to try and steal an election. Now, getting on over to the corporate media and their hysteria, which is definitely rising, Newsweek is now out there accusing WikiLeaks and Julian Assange of working with Russia. They're in cahoots with Russia. They're arms of Russian propaganda. Anything that doesn't agree with us, that's a tool of the Russians. We're getting into McCarthyism again. We really, really are. Now, interestingly enough, during this morning's hearings, James Comey did acknowledge that there is no evidence that Russia was dealing directly with either WikiLeaks or Julian Assange. So it's just out there. They're trying to win through intimidation or just win through repetition. If we tell you the lie over and over and over and over again, sooner or later you'll just get tired of asking questions and you will believe what we want you to believe. That's the theory. Other people have different points of view. Paul Craig Roberts is out there saying the corporate media is now in total collapse. And he's talking about how the corporate media is losing viewership, readership, and the only thing they can think of doing, because their business model and their corporate and political ties prevent them from telling the truth, all they can do is go on out there and scream that the independent media, they're the fake news. We're the real news. Yeah, they're the fake news, and we've got to enforce some way where the American people are not allowed to see anything that's not approved by the U.S. government. Ever hear of this little thing called the First Amendment? The First Amendment guarantees a right to freedom of speech and freedom of the press, all of the press, so that the media can report on the wrongdoing of government without fear of retaliation. Now then, a little bit of good news over on the forefront with Rachel Maddow, who is still trying to deal with her faceplant over Trump's tax records, especially since it came on out. They're the exact same tax forms the Wall Street Journal had last summer when they came on out and said, well, we've got his tax return. There's nothing there. He paid taxes. And apparently there is a big stink going on with NBC management, because even though MSNBC is sort of a quasi-separate news division, NBC management is very angry that they were not even consulted on this grandstand, desperate attempt at a PR stunt that went horribly, horribly wrong. Well, Rachel's dealing with that. And now she has other problems. First of all, remember that by leaking Donald Trump's tax returns on TV, she committed a felony. And now Judicial Watch, Larry Klayman, the founder of Judicial Watch, is now suing Rachel Maddow for defamation. And she got served on that one this morning. It's time for the people to fight back any way we can. Lawsuits, exposure on social media, through the email. This is the final battle for the soul of the United States of America. If the deep state wins it, they're going to establish a dictatorship that will make Mussolini and Hitler blush. They're that scared of a free-thinking, skeptical American population. Speaking of which, very interesting story out of Investment Watch blog. Apparently, education experts are saying that children should be taught to recognize fake news in school. So when your kid goes to the state-controlled schools, instead of learning how to actually do anything that might get them a job, they're going to be propagandized. Global warming, human-caused global warming is real. GMOs are safe. They're doing that up in Canada. The Canadian schools are now teaching little tiny kids GMOs are safe. Don't believe anybody who says otherwise. And so now we've got this idea where the kids will go to school and they'll be taught endlessly. The corporate TV news networks are real. These newspapers are real. Everybody else is just a tinfoil hat, kook, wingnut, conspiracy theorist, and you don't want to look at them. You absolutely don't want to see them. I view this as probably about as successful as those anti-drug programs in the schools, which haven't worked at all. What will happen is the kids will go home and say, gee, I wonder what it is that they don't want me to see. Because kids are like that. Now, the BBC, on top of all of its... let me take a moment out here. Let's be fair and let's be just about BBC. The new season of Top Gear, with the new hosts, they've gotten the magic back. Claire and I watched that, and we're still going to watch Grand Tour. But we're going to watch the new Top Gear. They did get it back. They got the magic of the show back. That's on the good side. On the bad side, apparently a show made by Richard Branson's son's firm was trying to do a documentary about Australian Aborigines ravaged by alcohol addiction. And they showed this video that was supposed to be a party where everybody's just getting incredibly drunk, and it turned out it was actually a wake. And they got called on it, and as it turns out, they couldn't find footage of Aborigines getting drunk at a party, so they just went ahead and used the video from the wake and hoped nobody would notice. Too bad. That doesn't work in the age of the Internet. Apparently, somebody did a study of all the terror plots in 2015 and discovered 94.2% of the terror plots in 2015 were created by the FBI itself. Find some poor schmuck, talk him into doing something dramatic, give him the bombs, the materials, whatever, swoop in and arrest him, get the headlines, the FBI is succeeding in the war on terror. They're really good at smashing up terror plots they've created themselves, aren't they? And they're doing it to keep up the fear, and they're doing it to justify their budget. Because as you know, Trump's budget axe is coming on down, and now the FBI is going to Donald Trump and saying, look at all the terror plots we thwarted in 2015. That's why we have to have the money. And it's a fraud. 94.2% of all the terror plots in 2015 were created by the FBI itself. They're not the swell bunch of Joes that you saw on film and TV shows. Comey just demonstrated that again this morning in the hearings. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Turning over to the war zones, emphasis on the plural. I don't know. At what point do we say it's a world war? I mean, we're missing the Big Bang, like the Lusitania or Pearl Harbor or the USS Maine, but look at how many places around the world the U.S. is militarily engaged in. Sure starting to look like a world war to me. Anyway, apparently, along with all the other deployments, a U.S. landing ship with Marines has entered the Black Sea for drills with the Romanian Navy. Again, this is all taking place right on Russia's doorstep, but if Russia complains, corporate media is going to say, see, Russia's being hostile. Russia doesn't respect our right to go wherever we want. Well, just imagine if a Russian carrier group showed up in the Gulf of Mexico, which for the most part is considered international waters, what do you think the reaction of our politicians and corporate media would be? Oh, the Russians are here, the Russians are coming, we've got to do something. Amazing. Story coming out of Russia today, the West sights are now clearly set on Iran. And the problem is that apparently the war in Syria, part of the motive for that was intended to weaken Iran, to complete the encirclement of Iran. And at this point, it's pretty much obvious that however the situation in Syria resolves itself, it will not be in accord with the U.S. agenda. It looks like the Syrian government is going to be back in charge of pretty much most of that country. So they're desperate to bring Iran to its knees. Now, remember, all the way back, I think it was 2005, General Wesley Clark blew the whistle on what was really going on here, saying that there was a plan by the U.S. government to overthrow, regime change, or conquer every single oil-producing nation in the Middle East to force them to sell their oil only for the U.S. dollar. And the last one on the list was Iran, and that was scheduled to happen in 2008. Obviously, a little bit off the timeline here. But that's what's driving this. The United States is a failed empire. Our manufacturing has declined. The products that we have, that we offer to the rest of the world to buy, are seen as overpriced, overbloated, prone to failure, junk. I remember when I was a kid and they said, made in Japan means junk. And today it's the reverse. Made in Japan, you're going to get something that really works. Made in America, probably going to fall apart. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. The only thing still holding up Wall Street is the forcing of other countries to use U.S. Federal Reserve notes for cross-border trade and banking. And that means those countries have to come to the United States and either bring us manufactured products or agricultural produce to trade for those pieces of ink and paper, or they have to borrow the ink and paper at interest before they can go on out and do the business they want to do. And that's what these wars are trying to reinforce, taking the world back to Bretton Woods. And Iran is a holdout. Iran wants to use their own currencies. And of course, Iran is one of the few remaining nations left on earth that do not allow private central banking. And that has made them an enemy of every other nation that is enslaved to private central banking. We're going to take a break for station identification, and we'll be right back.